Aloha and welcome to Figments, the Power of Imagination. I'm Dan Leaf. I go by Fig and thus the name. And I've got a great guest today. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, of course, I have to do my opening rant. What will I rant about? The Ukraine situation looking pretty dicey in the East. And our guest will be able to give us from the front lines update. But if Russian forces don't withdraw, we lose. So a stalemate that leaves some Russian presence, in my mind, is absolutely a defeat for the world order, not just for Ukraine, not just for NATO, but for the world order. Secondly, I have my Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum shirt on today because it's 80 for 80 Day. 80th anniversary for the 80 brave men who got into B-25s on the aircraft carrier Hornet's deck and flew to Japan and bombed Japanese islands in a stunning, shocking turn of events just 5.5 months after the war started with the attack on Pearl Harbor. The attack by the Doolittle raid, I think, changed the course of the war. It affected things profoundly on both sides of the Pacific. And we should remember those brave men. We ought to ask ourselves, how come we were so good at surprises then, and we're so bad at surprises now? That irritates me. We need to do better. We should be as imaginative as they are. And my guest is pretty imaginative about how he supports American troops and State Department people around the world in doing their missions. I'd ask you to go back, speaking of Ukraine, and look on the Think Tech website or the YouTube Think Tech playlist for the military in Hawaii standing with Ukraine episode. I did an interview with Jay Fidel, and I think you'll find some thoughts of interest to you. But that's not why we're here today. Let's talk about why we're here. We're here to talk about patriotism without politics. And to do that, I've got a very special guest, a man who I met through my daughter. You all met her on Figments. And she introduced me to his nonprofit, Spirit of America. And Jim Hake, aloha and welcome to Figments, Power of Imagination. You're a pretty imaginative guy. How are you doing, Jim?
Aloha, Fig. Great to be with you.
You're just back from Ukraine, got back Saturday?
Yes.
And you shared a briefing with many of us who are interested in the work of Spirit of America. We'll get to that some. I've got to give the viewers a caveat, though, in this, my 28th episode of Figments, the Power of Imagination. Jim's done a gazillion interviews with people far more important and polished than I am with the Wall Street Journal and major broadcast outlets. Watch all those if you want to get the rest of the story. I really want to find out how this figment happened, this unique charity. Jim, I'd say Spirit of America is pretty darn unique, isn't it?
Yeah, we are one of a kind. We're the only privately funded nonprofit that's approved by the Department of Defense to work alongside U.S. military personnel all around the world to provide private assistance in support of their missions. We have pioneered a very entrepreneurial approach to, I'll say, national security and humanitarian issues that is a great complement for what government can do. And we're one of a kind, Fig, yes.
We are one of a kind. And the tagline, Patriotism without politics, in my mind, has two elements. One is you're not red or blue. You might be inside, you might be in the ballot box, but in your actions, they're not politically leaning or constrained. And the other is you get beyond what the government can do because it is a political process. I've got some old pictures of you here. Well, not all of you, but where does that Patriot come from? That's your dad on the left as a Navy Seabee, did you say?
Yeah, he was a young 22-year-old young man in that photograph. He joined the Navy to join the fight in World War II. He was a Seabee. He was in the European theater. He was D-Day +2 at Utah Beach.
Wow.
And so the Seabees lay down all the infrastructure so heavy artillery troops can move in massive numbers. And so after the beachhead was established, on D-Day, the Seabees came in, laid down all the pontoons so everything else could roll in.
Well, is that the source of your patriotism, of your sense of service to the country, or is there more to the story?
Well, I think there's a lot more to the story because my dad, like most members of our greatest generation, never really talked a lot about his service. And, it was, he did his part. He was not, not honored in any special way, but he was just one of the Americans that did his part, did their part. And that's why we always remember him as the greatest generation. I'm not sure quite what it is. I have always felt, as long as I can remember, that the ideas and ideals for which America stands are the best ideas in the world, that every person has the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I don't think you get any better than that. And maybe part of that was growing up. I was born and grew up in the Philadelphia area, our nation's birthplace. And
right.
In Philadelphia, you're always trying to take credit for as much as you can, because you don't get there. You always feel like you're maybe at the middle or bottom of the list. And one of the things that we had growing up was a copy of the Declaration of Independence on the stairway going from downstairs to upstairs to where the kids all had our rooms. And so I walked by that declaration every day growing up. And I can't say I stopped and reflected on each time. Sometimes running up or down, but that was part of the ethos of growing up, being connected to our nation's birth.
So my daughter Yating, whom you've met, and she's an amazing human being and leader about more than anything else. She talks a lot about the importance of symbols and rituals in forming your beliefs and in pursuing organizational goals, which is an aside to say I had a similar thing in our household. When my dad served in the Navy at the end of World War II. His father had served in Europe as a Marine in World War I, right at the end. And he passed away when I was 5, but my grandfather's service cap with the globe and anchor sat on the same table you're talking about in our house of the era. And you're right, I didn't stop and genuflect to it or necessarily ponder it consciously, but it was always there, just like your Declaration of Independence, which is truly one of the most remarkable documents ever, but that's not why we're here. And you had a pretty big family, 4 siblings, if I remember.
Yeah, there were 5 of us kids. I'm sure at times an unruly bunch. I was the youngest of the 5.
Oh, you're the youngest, but were you the best football player? Because I got to show this picture because it is a pretty cool picture.
That's
hero,
my
hero hair.
Yeah, the old hair. The old 1970s era hair helmet. And that's from high school football. I was the captain of our team. I think my brother was a better football player than I was, but I wore the same number as he did, in playing high school ball.
What position did you play?
I was an offensive guard and a linebacker.
I played outside linebacker in our small town at 103 pounds. So I played mostly on my butt after getting knocked on my butt. But the family, you kind of reinforce your sense of service because I had 6 siblings, 5 of whom survived. And, you have roles and responsibilities that you can't wait to be asked to fill. You just do it. Okay. For my siblings, I was not always perfect about that. So I don't want nasty emails. So then you went to school, went to Dartmouth and Stanford and studied business and had a pretty good career. Here's a good life picture watching it. I think you said it was a Clippers game, but it's right after 9/11.
Right. And those are my 2 sons. They were 4 and 7 at the time. Yeah. And we were at a basketball game in Los Angeles where I lived at the time. And it was 9/11 that prompted me to start Spirit of America.
So I'm reading your face there because I was in Pentagon on 9/11. We have a shared experience, just like every other American, that you're it's, there is a real sense, even though I was already in the military as a one star in the Pentagon, but what can I do? What can I do to confront this situation? But you weren't in the military, you were a venture capitalist. I'm going to assume that you're doing pretty well, pretty well.
Well, at the time, I had started an internet software company called Big Buttons, which was a predecessor to the apps on iPhones and tablets today. And the same idea, you press a, that's why it was called Big Buttons. You press a big button to get the information you want rather than having to search around the web to find it. And I started that. I actually closed the first round of funding for that on the exact day that the NASDAQ peaked in March of 2000. And which was both good news and bad news, because the good news was you could, it was a frothy market to raise money in. The bad news was everything went downhill from there.
Right.
And it made it difficult to make it through what I refer to as the internet extrusion process at the time. So when the attacks of 9/11 occurred, I was looking for a buyer for the software that we had built. And my immediate thought when those attacks occurred was I wanted to do something to help. But I didn't have any idea what I could do that would be useful. And it was, and I didn't have any government or military background whatsoever. I'd never met an active duty member of the military at all.
No kidding.
No kidding. And
oh, wow.
So that I didn't have any background was a good thing for two reasons. One is I was open-minded and didn't know what couldn't be done. That's a little bit of the obvious one. But the other part was that I knew I didn't know, so I wasn't going to be the so-called smart guy who could figure out what needed to be done in Iraq or Afghanistan or anyone else. So we'll talk more about it, but the premise of the organization was based on listening to people closest to the problem and listening to what they say is needed, rather than come in from a top-down. I lived in What's that?
The customer, kind of?
Well, yeah, right, exactly.
What a concept.
No kidding. And, one of the things in the world of international aid and assistance is, well, kind of how the country operates around the world is just about the exact opposite of what we know in our own economy has given us the most dynamic and innovative economy in the history of the world. But what we use as a nation, mainly driven by our government institutions, great in many ways as they are, is a top-down approach, which just doesn't work as well as more bottom-up, entrepreneurial approaches.
And it's heavily constrained. I think you're right, there are pluses and minuses to it. Speaking to a leader of a government coming out of a long period of isolation, who complained about dealing with the U.S. For arms sales. So why should we do that? I said, well, there are two things. You get better stuff because we make better stuff. And secondly, you get all these constraints and these rules, and they reinforce a legitimate ethical approach to business. But sometimes you have to be faster than that. And that's where your business approach really delivered. And I have the baseball that's with the Spirit of America logo on that you sent to some of us on the board of advisors there. But that's was your initial idea, came from what somebody, a soldier in Afghanistan, was doing with local people to connect with them?
Yeah, it was really a remarkable story and a genuine light bulb moment. So it took me a while to figure out what I could do that would actually be useful. And especially as an entrepreneur, you learn pretty quickly that you can't confuse motion with progress, that you actually have to produce results or you're dead. There's figuratively speaking, of course. And so I stumbled upon, this was in 2003 at this point, where people still channel surfed. Right now, with everything's on demand, you don't really channel surf as much, if at all. Channel surfed, I came upon this National Geographic show that was telling the story of the Special Forces team in Afghanistan. And the scene that caught my eye was these Special Forces soldiers playing baseball with Afghan boys and girls. And you have this Sergeant First Class Jay Smith telling a story about how this came to be, that he and one of his teammates on the Special Forces A team brought over their mitts to play catch. The kids working for them in their kitchen started to use it to play catch themselves. And the sergeant called his wife back home and said, honey, can you send over to bats, balls, and mitts so these kids can play a real game? And one thing led to another. And here's this whole wild scene on National Geographic. And so everything crystallized to me at that point in time. And I thought, this is just great. This sergeant, his name is Jay Smith. He did this on his own initiative. The idea that anyone would bring baseball to Afghanistan would be absurd in a way. And he was fired up when he was talking about it. And I thought, okay, there have to be other men and women serving around the world, serving our country around the world, who want to do something to help the local population and build relationships and better express who we are as Americans. And they just need some help to do it because they can't do it through government channels, quickly enough or what have you. And I was sure that there would be other people back home like me that would be happy to help if only they knew what was needed, and that I could use the internet to connect the two, essentially to build a platform that connects supply with demand. It was the central idea. And so after that, I tracked down Sergeant Smith, who's the producer of the show. We were in touch through email. I wanted to see him in person to talk about this idea, because anything else wouldn't give me a true read on whether it was a good idea. So he said, okay, meet me at Fort Bragg on June 1st. And I said, great, where's Fort Bragg? And anyway, I found out it was in North Carolina, and I went there, we met, and I laid out the idea, just what I said, which is, you or people like you need something to help the local population wherever you're serving. Instead of asking your families, you ask me and my organization, and I'll use the internet to get people to help. And Jay kept saying, this is going to save lives. And the third time he said it, so this was the first active duty member of the military I'd ever met. And I had no idea that, special forces guys are not, welcoming and eager to meet outsiders and all that sort of thing. And I just thought, well, yes, enthusiasm's natural. So he explained that because of the relationship that he had built, he and his team built with the villagers, by doing things that helped build trust and goodwill with them, that the villagers formed a night watch patrol to protect our guys from Al-Qaeda with them crossing the Pakistan border at night. And so he actually explained how this was going to save lives. And at that point, I thought, oh man, now I really have to do this. I mean, I can't hear that. And I would never forgive myself if I didn't give it a shot, understanding that. So that's when I started the organization.
So I do have chicken skin, as we say in Hawaii. And I wish we had hours to talk about this. You and I have talked about it before, but you are representing the best of America through the spirit, thus the name of being altruistic wherever we are. And it's not because we're a better country. We were blessed with these incredible circumstances of geography and everything that led to founding a life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness foundation to our country, but also business, because America does good business, but the government does not do good business. And you're bringing that responsive, customer-focused approach mixed with the altruism of military and diplomatic service overseas. It's a secret sauce in my mind. It really is.
Yeah, well, and you need both. It's not.
Yeah.
And so what we bring is a critical and what has been missing piece of the ecosystem to bear, which is private entrepreneurial capability that is fast and flexible, has certain kinds of know-how. It's not about the money. It's about all kinds of things and how you think about doing things, more bottom-up approaches. But what we do would be impossible without the collaboration with our troops and diplomats. So it's not that one is better than the other. You just need that kind of ecosystem. And to get that kind of ecosystem required basically an act of Congress and an agreement with the Department of Defense that only took 15 years to get in place. But that's all solid now. Yeah,
and you had the perseverance to do it. I'm going to take my brief break now so we can get to the rest of the story and talk specifically about Ukraine. On May 2nd, I'll have another great guest. I'm blessed with great friends to talk about imagining history you can feel. Clint Churchill is one of the founders of the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum here on Ford Island. It's an incredible place. Clint's an incredible guy. He's also got a unique initiative going on here in Hawaii that I'll tell you about. But let's get back to Jim and Spirit of America. So you did this, you got it started. Yay, you can go back to business and leave ThinkTech running. But you only did that for a bit and you came back and it's become your life, right?
Yes, I did. And
why did you come back? Because you did go back to business for a time.
I did. And I should note that the first two officers I met after starting the organization were then Colonel Joe Dunford, who was the chief of staff to Major General Jim Mattis at the 1st Marine Division in Camp Pendleton.
Yeah, we have a picture of you with General Mattis, I think.
Yeah, you do. And so that they would, and the other shot is at the Marines Evening Parade here in Washington, D.C. So we did a lot with the Marines in Iraq and then later in Afghanistan. And so in 2009, then Colonel Dunford was Lieutenant General Joe Dunford, 3-star Marine officer, and he invited me to be the guest of honor at the Marines Evening Parade down here, in Washington, D.C., which I had never heard of. But it was, and the funny thing is when he called me up to invite me, he said, I'd like to invite you to be the guest of honor at the Marines Evening Parade. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And I said, well, thank you, Joe. I'll work on my wave, like this. And Jim is not that, unfortunately, he didn't hang up the phone. He said, Jim, it's not that kind of a parade. Anyway, so it was, it's with the Marine Corps band, the silent drill team, the just an incredible honor and a deeply, deeply moving experience. And I thought that if what Spirit of America had done up to that point in time meant that much to General Dunford and the Marines, that they would, give me and give the organization that honor, that I owed it to them to do everything I could, especially to help the Marines in their deployments to Afghanistan, because I knew our decentralized model of assistance would be a really good match for Afghanistan. So I came back to the organization, and here we are.
Yeah, so folks, go to their website, take a look at the work they do more broadly than Ukraine, and who's endorsed it. Their board of advisors, myself notwithstanding, is an incredible list of leaders who believe in this unique, one-of-a-kind model that's worthy of your support, and I'll provide that link so you can consider donating later. We have to get to Ukraine in the remaining 7 minutes. So you're just back. I know that Spirit of America is providing all non-lethal assistance, no bullets, bombs, missiles. So like your helmets, body armor, food, first aid kits, right? That's in large numbers to the people of Ukraine.
Yes, I mean, so for Americans who want to save lives and help Ukraine win, Spirit of America is truly the best option. And what we're doing is taking Ukraine's side. And this is very consistent with what U.S. troops and diplomats are all geared to do, which is how do we help Ukraine prevail in this genuine battle of good versus evil. So most humanitarian assistance organizations that we've all heard of are neutral, which means they will not support any side in a conflict. Well, we're taking the side of Ukraine in this conflict, and we understand that it's not only about Ukraine and the terrible human suffering that's taking place there at the hands of Russia, but it's about really the fight to defend the free world that's happening, and the front lines right now are in Ukraine.
And it is good versus evil. And I've been in a good versus evil fight. Might be imperfect against imperfect as well, but the world order will suffer if the Russians are allowed to be victorious in any source. So win is almost a dirty word. Do you get much pushback from donors when you say we're not neutral? We're a not neutral charity / non-government organization, or is that something people find attractive?
Well, in this particular case, I think it's pretty attractive because it's so clear. And, I think people are uncomfortable a little bit with the idea of winning. It's a little hard to explain. And it's, the world is a complicated place. War is, messy, terrible, complicated as well. And the idea that you would try to affect something to win is just outside of most people's frame of reference. But when you talk to people about it, they go, well, of course we want to help Ukraine win. There's so much at stake, and for us, I look at the situation and say, well, we can help the victims of war all day long, but shouldn't we try to stop the suffering at its source? That's what we need to do. And that's what we're doing with the non-lethal assistance to Ukrainian armed forces and the civilian volunteers. People like, you served, Fig, so you're not a great example of what I'm saying, but the people who just from any walk of life who are taking up arms to defend their country and defend the innocents that are being attacked and killed by the Russians every day.
And if there's any beauty in this ugliness of war, it's been, I think, and you've been there, I haven't, the response of the common citizens of Ukraine who have picked up arms and are defending their own lives, livelihood, their homeland, and their freedom.
It's inspirational. And so what I think we see are some of the benefits of a free society, as in America, where like, nobody told me to start Spirit of America. I just did it. And nobody told these Ukrainian civilians who are volunteering to go fight as part of what's called the Territorial Defense Forces. Nobody told them they had to do that. And people were, you have grandmothers who are throwing Molotov cocktails at Russian tanks, not because somebody told her to do it or assigned her the job. It is an expression of a free society, which is one of the reasons why it's so important for Americans to help the Ukrainians in this fight.
And it's a lesson to others who may be oppressed, attacked, invaded. Yes. I can think of a few countries and locations that face that. You're actually providing, Spirit of America is actually providing some training to those who decide to man up, woman up, whatever, join the militia. But that's based on a long-standing relationship. How long has Spirit of America been engaged in Ukraine? Because you can't do this instantly. You need relationships.
No, and it's true. And a lot of people look at the situation, kind of try to rush in, and it's much more complicated than it seems. You think, okay, well, to send some body armor and helmets or first aid kits over to Ukraine to a soldier, easy day. And it's not, but we have been active in Ukraine since 2014, since I'll say the most recent original Russian invasion. And, there have been, I think, before this war started, somewhere close to 20,000 Ukrainians who have been killed at Russian hands in that country. And one of the first projects that we did was help to stand up Ukraine's first armed forces radio station to meet the information needs of the Ukrainian soldiers on the front lines between 2015 and up until now. The station is still broadcasting, and it's an answer to the massive Russian propaganda and misinformation, which is polluting that region.
And it seems that the Ukraine is winning the information war, which is shocking. So you've got relationships. We only have a tenth of the time. I'd love to talk. Maybe you'll come back, get an update as things progress in Ukraine. But I know, because I've assisted minorly in minor ways with some of your efforts in Asia, but you're in Africa, you're in the Middle East, you've been in Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, the African continent, Laos, Mongolia, Vietnam, Pacific Islands, I think. Does that work go on, even though clearly Jim Hakes focused on Ukraine as the boss? Does that work continue?
Our operations all around the world are continuing, and we are supporting the efforts of U.S. military and State Department personnel in all the places that you mentioned. And a good way to think about it is, for anyone serving this country abroad, Spirit of America is the best friend they could possibly have. Because our only agenda is to help them succeed in what they're trying to do, and to advance both our interests in national security objectives, but also bring people to choose our side and to choose a side of freedom, democracy, what we stand for as a country.
And you represent the very best, I think, Jim, of what we stand for. And It's hard not to get choked up to see it in such an important time. When the country seems so divided, you unite the efforts of civilians, government, diplomats, and the military. We talked a little bit about this because united we win, divided we don't win, and the bad folks win. And there's a lot of symbolism we talked about in what America is and what America needs to be. We're not perfect. No country is, but we bring a lot of hope to the world, and you expand the impact of that hope through Spirit of America. And I'm proud to be associated with the organization and to know you. Folks, I'm going to ask you to donate to Think Tech Hawaii too, because they make this possible. But before I do, let me give you our YouTube playlists for both the old Figments on Reality and this show. So scan those bad boys and please click like, because it makes me feel good. Remember that this is truly a not-for-profit endeavor. Go to Spirit of America's website and take a look and donate if you can. If you just want to feel good, go there. If you got a headache, go there. You'll feel better. Jim, thanks so much for all you do, for being a friend, and for your leadership. How many folks are there on the Spirit of America team?
We have 27 now. We've grown a lot in the last few weeks.
Doing a lot of work and getting the kind of donation support you should, but you need more, and they need it, friends, to save lives and to support freedom. So let's stay in touch, Jim. I'm sure we will. We always do. And I hope to have you back on maybe in a few months when we know more about the outcome in the Ukraine.
Well, Fig, thank you for having me. It's been both a pleasure and an honor to be with you. And thanks everyone for watching and listening in today.
All right. God bless, Jim. Thanks, folks. Thank you for joining us for Figments, the Power of Imagination. I'll be back, as you know, in a couple of weeks to have Clint Churchill and talk about history. Think Tech Hawaii is a great nonprofit, also needs your support to bring you citizen journalists like me, sharing their ideas on a really wide array of topics that otherwise wouldn't make the air. So thanks for watching, and aloha.
Thank you so much for watching Think Tech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.